All right. Hello, everyone. Mike Sims here for Let's Be Blunt podcast, coming at you now every Thursday. We try to come in every Thursday afternoon. But, we got some great interviews that we've been recording, but we're going to try to go live every Thursday around this time. But, you've all heard me ranting and raving about all these different bills and things happening in politics and what we're fighting and what we're up against. And a lot of people kind of call on me to ask, where we're at with that. Well, I have people that I need to call on and ask. And one of the main people I go to is our next guest, Mr. Blake Butler. And as part of the Southeastern Industrial Hemp Association, correct?
Mm-hmm. Southeast Hemp Association.
Which is, going to be going away, but we could get into that. But if you got anybody, there's a few small list of people to thank in the state for access to what we have now. And this gentleman here is definitely at the top of that list. He is one of, if not the only voice we have many times in Raleigh. You would think this is an industry well represented, and it is, but it's not well represented by the masses, but really just a few small, dedicated group of folks. And Blake is the person I go to for guidance in this, and we can get into all the fun things and all that. But one thing about Blake is I came in and met Blake, and we started the fight for smokable hemp flower, and that's when I really got to know Blake. And I came in, typical me, guns blazing, T-shirt, shorts, a scruffy beard, the whole nine, ready to cuss out some politicians and go in there and tell them to go to hell because marijuana's coming anyway. But Blake's like, whoa, this isn't how this works. Let me show you the better way. And of course he did. And if you're in someone's house playing their game, you got to play by their rules.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
And Blake's a master of that. But Blake, man, thank you. And tell us what you've been going through the last few years. Tell us a little bit about yourself. But what's up, man? How are you?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Sure.
And thanks so much for building a great business that we can all be proud of in the hemp industry. It was just a blessing that I had so many folks that surrounded me when we were fighting for smokable hemp. We were able to build up a great trade association made up of growers and retailers and others. But the last few years have been interesting, and it's a lot of moving parts. What really happened in our state, folks, that changed everything is we decided not to submit a state plan to the USDA to continue growing hemp, even though we had a pilot program in place since 2015. So that became the legal conundrum that you've been reading about for the past 6 months, that hemp would be illegal on July 1st unless we figured out some way to pass a piece of legislation. And this is real important, Mike, because if we don't have clarity on the definition of hemp and marijuana, we cannot even discuss medical marijuana, quite honestly, if we don't know exactly what we're talking about. Sure. And that's what we were able to do a couple of weeks ago. So just so everybody knows, again, with the Senate bill in North Carolina, 455, hemp has been removed off the controlled substances list, which it should have been done long time ago. Amen. Removed off the controlled substances list. The language itself mirrors the Farm Bill as far as what hemp is. You can participate in interstate commerce. But a new thing we got in there, Mike, that a lot of people don't know, it includes food and beverage now.
Which is huge
because a lot of attorneys from different hemp companies would call me and say, we want to do a CBD sparkling water, but we don't see anything at the state level that would cover us legally. Now we have that since we're in line with the federal farm bill, and that goes for hemp protein powder.
We don't have that federally currently either, right? Because the FDA really hasn't approved any.
They really haven't approved it, but at the same time, they haven't banned anything, and they said don't do it. So, But for us folks, again, with so many good companies here in North Carolina, just a vital part of the Southeast, I would say North Carolina is the epicenter of the hemp industry in the Southeast right now, for sure. Virginia's going through their own issues, as you know. South Carolina's just trying to figure out what they're going to be. I see them doing more textiles possibly, as well as Georgia, but North Carolina continues to be the epicenter, Mike.
Yeah, I agree too, and we're lucky enough to be here and grow along with it. But I think, as you could agree with me, if you look at the parts of the state that's leading both in the progression of this plant and the degression of the industry, it easily we could carry the vote Asheville, Mecklenburg County, Wake County, out in the coast, but it's these rural parts, and more than anyone. So I guess people are saying, hey, everybody smokes, or everybody knows somebody that smokes, or my grandma uses this stuff now. Like, when is North Carolina going to get access? What, like, full access? And now talk about, I guess, what just happened, how we're protected, and what are we looking at next to get access? Tell them the kind of people we're fighting if you want to go there.
Well, folks, as you know, hemp has been tough in North Carolina because we got wrapped up in the smokable hemp dilemma, but we were the only state to beat the smokable hemp ban in the nation without having to go to the courts to decide. So that was big. But at the same time, it hurt some feelings down there on Jones Street. Some folks got their feelings hurt. Mike, if I reflect back on the last 6 months about what I heard took place down there to lobby for the medical marijuana bill, which is the Compassionate Care Act. I'm afraid, like the example you just gave when you and I first met, I'm afraid that the messaging wasn't on point.
Sure.
And our legislators
That's a nice way to put it.
Right. Legislators got a little confused about what everybody wanted in all this.
Sure.
And I was even told, on the reapproach, it might be good if you get everybody in a room that's in the different groups that are, lobbying and talking to our legislators, and get everybody on the same page. And here's another thing I'll say that's real important. If you want to talk to a legislator, I would recommend doing it not down in Raleigh, but figuring out, say, if they're somewhere up there in Boone or something, if you could just eat lunch with them.
Right.
And just talk to them in their own town, in a comfortable setting.
The guard's down a bit. Even.
Oh, yeah. When I was trying to talk to folks a couple of weeks ago, those people lined up at the door.
Right.
So they were ready to get on with it and get me out of there to the next person. But now, as far as marijuana goes in North Carolina, it's hard to get a read on it right now. Where, the state sees it going. The only thing I'll say that was really disappointing is I know a lot of folks worked real hard on that Compassionate Care Act on the state Senate side, but as soon as it crossed over to the North Carolina House, they didn't assign it to one committee. So that just tells you, or tells me, in my opinion, that they didn't have any interest in debating it this session anyway.
Sure.
But at the same time, I can tell you that I'm of the opinion that they like to toy with our industry.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can. Because we're new and we're unregulated, and there's just a few of us, like you mentioned, that will go down there and fight the good fight. But Senator Brent Jackson, as you know, and we've got some other legislative leaders that have helped us at the 11th hour. But as far as the future of North Carolina and access to cannabis, it's still a very, very murky picture. There is so many split opinions. And, with the average age of the legislator pushing over, each legislator pushing over 62, 63, there's still a reefer madness mentality there.
Yeah, and I wish 62, 63 was the worst of what we were dealing with. We got some of them pushing 80, over 80.
I know. They're getting ready to retire, a few of them.
Goodness gracious. So, how long you been doing this now? And you just decide one day, hey, I need to go fight for this plant. How did it come about?
Back in 2014, and Brian Bullman, who started Carolina Hemp Company.
What's up, Brian?
He had a energy drink that he was distributing in the early days called Canna Energy out of Colorado.
I remember that. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I didn't even know Brian. I wasn't even in him. I had a PR firm in Asheville. He called me up and he said, look, we got a rogue sheriff out west that's removing Canna Energy off the convenience store shelves. And I said, why is that? And he said, because it has the 5-fingered leaf on the side.
Oh, wow.
And I said, but that's a hemp leaf. And he said, yeah, Blake, it's a hemp leaf. But this is our biggest problem right now. We can bring in the products, but there's so many folks that think that these are marijuana products. So that began my journey. I went up and saw the sheriff. He threw me out of his office, and he said, get out of here. But I got in the car and went down to Raleigh, realized they were getting ready to write the legislation. And, I sat in the back in my button-down and khakis, and after it was all over with Preston Whitfield and Bob Crumley and John Patterson, all these hemp folks that have been hovering around, this guy came up to me and he said, are you a narc? And I said, no, why would you think that? And he says, because we've never seen you before.
Right.
And I said, well, I think that's a good thing. That somebody like me just drove all the way from Asheville. But on my way out, I will tell you this. A couple of people grabbed me and says, if you could figure out how to educate the public on hemp, it's going to be a lot easier for us to introduce this program. And that's where I came up with HempX Asheville, my first event. And that's where I kind of settled in my place that I'm more comfortable defending everybody else for the right reasons,
right,
even if I never meet them. And so that's kind of how I got into it, and that's where I've stayed. You know, I've never been in the individual hemp business per se, but man, I love hanging out with you guys and defending you guys.
They bring some great folks, but you know, and let's talk about that. I guess you went on to form the North Carolina Industrial Hemp Association.
Well, Bob Crumley had already started that, but as you know, he started a company called Founders Hemp, so he became a competitor, and rightfully so. He called me and he says, "Hey, would you consider coming in?"
Right.
And so I took over as executive director, and then during COVID, it was very, very tough for the industry, and a lot of states started gravitating towards us. So we morphed into the Southeast Hemp Association. Now, what we see right now in the industry is a lot of consolidation with trade industries, or excuse me, trade associations. We had 32 hemp associations at one time.
Wow.
So the Southeast Hemp Association is going to begin dissolving in a way that we're encouraging our members to start to join other national associations and those that I'll be a part of and can be there to protect. But I really do think, Mike, it's time for everybody to get on the same page so we can defend everybody.
And see, that's
better.
one of the frustrations, because in the beginning I used to think people really weren't involved. But then I realized there's a lot of people involved, but everybody's so departmentalized. Like,
good point.
Yeah, like everybody is in the same fight, but none of us are united. And the only time it only feels like we're united is we have like a present moment fight to fight. Like when we were fighting for smokable hemp flower, or when, you know, we were wondering if the products we sell were going to become illegal overnight this past month. All of a sudden, everybody wants to participate. And I get it. Nothing's a problem until it's a problem, but we saw a lot of this coming. But I guess the whole thing behind it is, you know, there's so much to it. There's so much to fight or whatever. But you said part of the problem of also is you've seen a lot of companies going out of business, correct? So a lot of people just aren't there to support because they're gone.
That's right. We, we had a thriving CBD hemp industry throughout the Southeast 3 years ago. COVID took its toll.
Right.
A lot of the retail operations didn't know who their customers were. Now, granted, you had got a great newsletter list. You communicate with your customers.
We just got lucky.
Yeah. Well, you communicate. A lot of people didn't know, and when the foot traffic stopped, a lot of our retailers
It forced us to go digital real fast. Yeah.
And from a grower standpoint, I mean, let's be honest, Mike, a lot of folks ended up with hemp in the barn, not being able to sell that hemp when a lot of our processors went offline and went out of business. We've had 12 processors in North and South Carolina go out of business in the last year.
Wow. And that's just devastating. You know, we, myself included, you think, let's fight for this. And then once you realize whether you lose or win the fight, that's just the beginning.
Just the beginning. And remember that we always like to fine tune where we're going with this. Like 455 was a great win. Smokable hemp was a great win. But now it's time to champion the plant.
Right.
Now it's time to really start to champion and explain and educate the great things we can do with it. And you mentioned something that's the most important thing to North Carolina,
Right.
is that bring back that rural community. Bring it back to life, that land that's been sitting there.
Right.
I mean, let that revenue come into the places that need it the most.
Right.
I have heard so many sheriffs say, hey, 80 out of the 100 counties are just ravaged with methamphetamines.
Right.
So my question is, well, what the hell are we going to do about it?
Yeah, who needs work more than the meth head?
Right. So we got, but still,
those habits get expensive.
but taking it
No,
back to
seriously.
the thinking of starting to eliminate those drugs beyond the gate.
Right.
Beyond the gate, the ones that rip up families, that tear apart communities,
Right.
that create overdoses.
Right.
I mean, that's a whole different deal than what you and I are talking about right now. A plant that can relieve stress, pain, that becomes a supplement,
Right.
a way of life. It's a whole different deal than these other things that sometimes law enforcement are very, very nervous and scared to go after in certain places because they might not end up, in the right
Moving
place.
through. Yeah.
That's right.
So, what would you think, there's a couple ideas I've had, because I feel like we've tried this incremental change and fight. I talked to Taylor and a couple other people. I thought about doing like a town hall discussion, maybe 3 different parts of the state, and invite everybody, opposition, everybody for this, everybody against it, and let's all sit it down and talk about it. I feel like over the years, everybody's gotten Twitter finger, as I call it, where everybody, hiding behind their keyboard says some really crazy things and has some vivid memory or vivid imagination about a lot of these things. So a couple, I guess, two-part. Do you think something like that would be effective? And what would you think would be the best way to unite all these multiple groups throughout the state and the country to kind of get us all to have one voice? Do you have any kind of input on what we could do to maybe pull that in?
I would say physicians and universities are key.
Wow, that's powerful, yeah.
And the reason being is a lot of folks, when they look at cannabis, and there's so much more beyond smoking cannabis.
Right.
And so having a physician there that's well embedded in THC and or CBD as a supplement, very important in my opinion.
Sure.
And then with the universities, it's time that we engage them more. We know that generation that's on those university campuses right now doesn't even think this should be an issue.
Right.
Doesn't even think you and I should be talking about this. Wants to address those bigger problems that I just mentioned.
Sure.
When it comes to the drug war. But yet, if the more discussions and educational opportunities we hold on places of credibility, like universities, right, or bring in a few doctors that are open-minded, I think that helps, Mike. And I'll tell you why. Is, when folks were trying to build hempcrete houses around North Carolina, I would get calls from building inspectors that says, Blake, I just can't approve this wall system.
Right.
It's not in the manual.
Right.
You guys got to educate people.
White.
And one building inspector said something to me that's always sat with me. He said, I know this is a great plan. I've heard all about it, but I think you guys assume too much. You assume that we know it's great.
Right.
You assume that we know it can bind with lime and be just as safe as other things in a wall system.
Right.
We need some sort of coordination between architects, building inspectors, and home builders to deem it safe. And that's the kind of thinking that I think you and I got to take a step back. Sure. Even though we assume everybody that knows this plant's great, we still got to go back
right,
and do a little educating.
Right. And I guess at times, and I'm sure you feel the same frustration, I feel like I do that all the time, but you realize sometimes that it's just falling on deaf ears and nothing you could say can change someone's perspective. And you got to realize, too, that it's not a lot of people, I guess. I even see it with people in the industry that still kind of repeat some of the propaganda they've heard or whatever. It's like, it's maddening. But, it's disheartening because we have so little representation in the state. But on the grower side, we see that continuously shrinking. And these farmers that took a swing at it and saw it as a real cash crop opportunity, and was in the beginning, but I think that's where our regulation lacks, and regulating what can be grown, how it's grown, the safety of what you're actually growing, making sure there's a clear path of feeding a processing plant and having this. So you see North Carolina having any of that in place right now, where there's some kind of regulation guidance for like having testing done for herbicides and pesticides and things that actually make it safe?
North Carolina has washed their hands of the hemp industry.
They've had enough.
I'm not kidding you. I mean,
well, that's good though, man.
That's good. But
you won.
Well, no, we have won. But what we have to do is exactly what you're saying, is be proactive and come up with more of a all products safe for consumption push.
Right.
We brought these hemp industry folks together, and we're focused on all products safe for consumption. We're looking towards our processors that are CGMP, because one day when the FDA takes a little shift, and I think they'll shift us probably towards food safety guidelines, a lot of our processors, your company, will be ready to go. You'll be 3/4 of the way there.
Yes, sir.
And it'd be so easy to graduate to that level. So I do think we take the obvious. When people call me and they say, well, Blake, there's no certification to grow hemp organically. And I say, but there's plenty of guidelines to grow other things organically. Right. So just follow all those.
Sure.
And if you grow hemp in the same field that you grow organic tomatoes, follow those guidelines. Guess what you can call it, Mike? Organic hemp.
But there's a few people I think in North Carolina that's figured that out for sure.
But that kind of thinking, I think, is valuable in the sense if you and I were proactive and we said we're going to go down to Raleigh once every couple of months and just educate our legislators.
Right.
Let them know what's going on in the industry. They're not asking us to come down there. You and I are just going
And
to
that's
do it.
what's, you hit on it. We're seeing a shrinking, group of people that they're even in business. And then you take that group of people and narrow it down to people that are even in business, and then the ones that can afford to give to some kind of representation, a committee or a group like you formed, and then find someone with the kind of money and time to give as well in this industry is damn near impossible. I'm privileged. I got employees that make me look great and give me the opportunity and time to go do the things I do. But, I think they're playing, like you said, I think they're playing our face on knowing that we don't have much power or representation. I tell people all the time, if you want to look what proper representation with lobbyists looks like, look no further than the NRA and what they've got away with in the last 10 decades, last 3 decades. But, the whole thing is they have power because they have lobbyist groups. North Carolina is no different. Who is our most powerful lobbyist groups we got right now in general? Not even cannabis aside. Who are we fighting? Who are the influencers in Raleigh?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a great question. And let's compare North Carolina and Virginia right now. As soon as North Carolina started discussing the Compassionate Care Act, we had folks from Curaleaf come down, TerraFly, all sorts of Canadian companies descend on Raleigh.
Yeah.
It became like a spear of greed really fast. And that scared some of our legislators too. But the marijuana lobby, Mike, is the strongest lobby. And you can look at the fact that every single state in this nation that has a medical or a rec program has banned Delta 8, Delta 10, HHC. And why is that? It's because the marijuana lobby comes in and says, Mike and Blake are unregulated.
Right.
And you're going to regulate us in this legislation?
Right.
Get rid of that now. And that's what Virginia has just done. And they pulled a fast one, folks, because as you know, they were on their way to pass some legislation to create dispensaries. Mike could have his new dream in place a little sooner than later.
Right.
But at the same time, the marijuana lobby, when that failed, has come back in and said, let's go ahead and ban Delta 8. So last Friday, Virginia hired 7 people to go around the state removing Delta 8 from the shelves. Now, we have so many friggin' problems in this country and in Virginia, by the way.
Yeah,
and they've hired 7 people to go around and remove Delta 8 problem.
Right, and I was talking to one of the guys, Travis, what's up, Travis, with Virginia Cultivars yesterday, and I guess not only are they threatening to take products, they're threatening to fine, take license, and then ban people from getting any kind of future licensing.
And 6 months ago, it seemed like it was going to be Disneyland up there in Virginia, didn't it?
Yeah,
or before the election.
Oh, we had it. We had it in the bag, and then a new election and a new governor, new rolling back of rules they're trying. So what I've seen in places like Texas and other places where they try banning these products, it's gone ultimately to the courts and shot down. Have we seen anybody in the U.S. currently that has had any kind of real Delta 8 ban that has stuck besides like recreational cannabis states?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in those states. The only state that has Delta 8 in the dispensary system is Michigan.
Okay.
They had a processor up there that put an SOP on file that said, look, we are doing this safely. We have folks that like it.
Right.
And so they've been able to bring it into the dispensary system. I know a lot of the cannabis folks still have a problem with it. They really do because it's running around unregulated in different places.
Let's be honest. If everything was legal, Delta 8 wouldn't exist.
Yeah. Well, but
I don't think.
But like I told Travis, because as you know, I talked to Travis the other night. It is very difficult for someone like me to defend Delta 8 because, as you know, it's not necessarily a natural cannabinoid from the plant.
Right.
And so it steps away from all the arguments that I've made. But at the same time, there's plenty of legislation out there in the agricultural world that they'll take corn syrup and create something else.
For sure.
So, I mean, we're taking full spectrum and creating something else.
The whole transparency of let's talk about what's really harmful and let's talk what's become a politicized pawn. And, and that's what's the frustration in this because I'm with you. I'm a purist. I like the plant as it comes out of the ground, off the stem. And, the least amount of stuff you do to it, the better for me. However, I'm a businessman. I see the need. I understand the need for vape carts and edibles and everything else. But, you know, even now we're getting some of these HACs and things like these, the other isomers, THCO and all these other things that are ultimately largely mostly synthetic. And I think that's where I'm seeing the issue. So you think that's probably where you think we're going to find more pushback there in the coming months?
I do, because I think so much of it is being done in a lab, and so much of it is being done as people think more and more. What I would rather see is us hold like a cannabinoid college and talk about CBG and CBN. I mean, we kind of leapfrogged all that, didn't we? You know, for a while, everybody says, "Hey, I'm gonna grow CBG. I'm gonna be a billionaire."
Right.
Well, you know how that went.
Right.
So, but still, I mean, if you think about all those other cannabinoids that we have not talked about, that we see on a chart, and that we know, you know, address specific things in the body when taken as a supplement. I still think we have an opportunity there, Mike, because I think that is for your older population, your new users.
Right.
I think they're probably going to be lean to you for a CBG discussing CBN other than a THCV.
Yeah, and we still, you know, of course, the customers have largely flip-flop to the parts of the plant that give you a psychoactive effect. However, we still have our base of people that use CBD regularly, myself included. And you're always going to have those folks. But, yeah, we're definitely got this influx of new people. I think, and I'm sure you can agree with me, I think what we're going to see is there's going to be a one-off example of someone getting harmed or taking something that was not mixed well or not made well, has some kind of other something in it, and they're going to make an example of that person and probably run with it, is what I think. But, you know, it is a bit scary. I tell people all the time, know what you're taking. Just because it looks pretty or you think you know the company, you know, ask for COAs, ask for, you know, where does this come from? Who manufactures it? Those kind of things. You know, if they can't readily answer that, you got a problem usually.
And it just surprises me. I'm just going to be very blunt. I have friends that like, yeah, I bought this thing at a gas station. I think it made me sick.
Right.
I mean, why would you go into a liquor store and buy the worst liquor?
Right, yeah.
And then go out in the parking lot and slam the bottle and say, hey, I think I'm sick.
They usually try to come out cheap. Like, I don't want to spend a lot of money on this.
Right.
Right.
But think about it. If there was a connoisseur inside the liquor store that could educate you and say, hey, you need to get this a little bit pure.
$2 Chuck and wine.
But education is so key. You do that in your stores, but in the gas station, convenience store market, no education.
That's what talking about Red just came in. What's up, Red? Red's in the building. We were out in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago, and, you know, of course, access to whatever you want, but I think that's the piece that was missing out there that we're huge on here is the education piece. It's an old hat for them. They were like, whatever. A lot of people, I was going to a few dispensaries questioning even what's on the shelf behind them, and they couldn't even really give me an answer of what it is or what about it, and I'm kind of teaching them as we go some of it, you know, so I think that's important through the entire process, and I think even once this becomes kind of mainstream thing is having that educational piece. Hell, I still learn something every day.
I do too, and I think that still should be our focus. We've only hit the tip of the iceberg with this right now. We got a lot more to talk, and at the foundation of that iceberg is a plant that has been here forever for a reason. Yeah. Anybody that says to me, like, you know, we messed up our environment, we've done all these things to wreck everything, Blake, and I'm like, really? Well, if that's the case, maybe you should start taking the plant that was here before we wrecked everything. Right. The one that the dinosaurs were chewing on. Right. Exactly. So how about that? I mean, but it's really true in that plant, as you know, Mike, is here for a reason, and there is no other plant that you and I could stay healthy from, to get protein from, to get natural relief from, and to build a shelter with. Right. That's it. You can't find one.
That's what I tell people all the time. If you can do it in plastics, you can do it in cannabis. Yeah. Everything from fuel to food to containers to you name it. And it's frustrating because we could, I mean, you know, I'm preaching to the choir as normal, but this is the cannabis legalization, full cannabis legalization is tied to pretty much every current modern day issue we have, from affordable housing to mental health to drug rehabilitation to overcrowded prisons, privatized prisons. We could go on and on and on.
And tax revenue.
And that tax revenue.
These states
and
are
to free up these cops to really fight crime.
Yeah.
Real crime.
But, I mean, the tax revenue these other states are realizing, and, I mean, how are you going to generate tax revenue with any other product right now. It would just have to be something whiz
Especially
bang.
with the economy that's tanking like it is. I guess if it makes sense, it just doesn't work out for us. Is what it feels like.
Well, it's going to work out for us because we're fighting the good fight, and we're fighting it for the right reasons. And you know, one thing we're not mentioning right now, but there's another, you know, entity that's looming out there that's closer than the FDA than anybody else, and I know that's pharmaceutical companies. And
I was going to say that's going to be our next fight is mushrooms. I don't know if you're ready.
There's a pharmaceutical company rep listening to this podcast right now.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
But that being said, somewhere in all of that, we're trying to help people, and you know, I do think that pharmaceutical companies and everybody in the entire, you know, world knows how valuable this plant is. They do.
Sure. And that's what I talk about. If nothing else, the straight hypocrisy of this, because right now, that you know, saying it has no medical benefit. Yet we have. I looked it up yesterday. We now have 4 named drugs, FDA-approved drugs, directly derived from cannabis.
And the first one was Epidiolex, as you know.
Yep. So then we now have 4. I was reading yesterday, but it's crazy. Yet we're still Schedule 1, meaning it's not only no medical benefit, it means it's more harmful than heroin and cocaine.
Well, and you look at that path, too. The former chair of the FDA is now the lobbyist for GW Pharmaceuticals that has the first patent for THC. Weird. Really weird, Mike. How did that happen?
I know. So it's crazy. And that's what a lot of my fear is in this gaining everyone to unite is most of the groups that are out there have some ulterior motive behind them trying to get their legislation passed or their motive or their piece of it. And I think that's why we fall short of really uniting this front. But you mentioned now we're dissolving Southeastern Industrial Hemp Association. Where's our next fight? Where are we going?
Well, I think some of our members are starting to pivot to fiber. Okay. And so I think what the National Industrial Hemp Council offers is being close to the USDA, grants to grow fiber and grain, which a lot of our, you know, growers, farmers are looking at right now.
Sure.
But at the same time, like we had a discussion an hour ago, there's probably a need for a retailers association at that state level. So that's something we need to, we need to discuss because there needs to be representation there if issues do come up.
There's definitely more retailers than there is farmers or processors in the state.
But the growers being directly under the USDA, it kind of changes the dynamic of how you would help them. If a grower called me right now and says, Blake, I need some help, there's no one I can call in Raleigh.
Right.
I'd have to call to D.C.
Federal.
Yeah.
Federal representation, any group like Southeastern Industrial?
Not from a bioregional basis, but, you know, we have, of course, the HIA, the National Hemp Association, and the National Industrial Hemp Council. If those 3...
Are they any good?
They're all good, but I think if we could all get on the same page with messaging and everything else, then we'd be a lot more effective because even our legislators in Washington would know who to talk to.
We need to get them on the show. You got that on the list, Marcel. We'll see what they're up to. But nah, man, it's incredible, and the work you've done has been truly greatly appreciated.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and for those out there again that don't know, this man again has worked his ass off to get back and forth between Asheville and Raleigh to do what he does. Where's Blake Butler now? What's the future? Hang out on the beach somewhere now that you beat the state of North Carolina?
I'm afraid not. You know, I'm still severely interested in fiber.
Right.
Just knowing that, you know, my family was in textiles and down in Rutherford County, and my other grandfather was a farmer.
I think, as you just said, we overassume. Mm-hmm. Tell us what this fiber could do. Tell us the current impact with fibers and the products we use and where we could be.
Yeah, I think if you even take our recent kind of struggles with the supply chain, and we look at the reliance on Russia for oil and the reliance on Russia for wheat, we already know we can create biofuels with hemp, but it's going to take research dollars. It's going to take monies allocated, and it's going to take partnerships with companies that are already doing something very similar.
Right.
First and foremost. And then you look at, you know, hemp seed, which we're trying desperately to get into the food chain with animal feed, and then really having it be more accepted widely. I think we could address food insecurities with hemp grain. I really do.
Right.
In so many places where people are starving, Mike, you could take just hemp grain, hemp seed, create protein powders, create granola bars with other things that bind. So again, I think we've got to remember that bringing hemp into your body,
right.
all that makes sense. But at the same time, industrially, we hadn't even explored anything yet.
Sure.
So I do think biofuels and hempcrete.
Because then we're fighting, little old petroleum companies that have no money at all and no legal representation.
But if you look at it, just objectively, if you said, we are launching the first line of hemp biofuels, and we are asking every major city to consider, switching out a few of their buses. Anything that I think is a direct route back and forth, I think should be using hemp biofuel.
Sure.
I really do. I think that that's a product like, they developed with other alternate fuels with transportation and others. We should go ahead and bring that in the supply chain.
I was even reading the other day about hemp toilet paper and how many thousands and thousands of trees it takes every year. I mean, just for a household, thousands of trees worth of lumber for toilet paper every year. So it's disgusting, man. It's, all these times it's like, man, if we could just find a better way. And I realize over and over again, the better way has already been there. It's right in front of us. It's usually we can't get to the better way because there are so many people doing what you do, but for another company, fighting in the opposite direction.
That's right. And you mentioned one other thing before for me to think about who is out there kind of against us.
Sure.
I want to mention this, and I want everybody to think about this, and it's going to go deep.
Right.
All right, it's going to go deep, folks.
That's what we like.
Marijuana is not a green industry. It's not an eco-friendly industry.
Right.
And the power that it's taking off the grid right now in the state of New York is enormous. And I've been in, conferences where people have talked about how hemp and marijuana are drastically different on the impacts on the environment, where hemp, as you know, is trying to clean it up.
Right.
And most of the marijuana has moved into indoor grows, which is really a drain on power, a drain on resources. So just remember that there's a lot of green things that we can talk about when it comes to hemp, but as far as creating a eco-friendly green economy, marijuana is not necessarily that industry. And that is brought up a lot in these discussions, so just know it's out there.
Yeah. And that's, you said, again, we haven't fully announced, but we're working on a similar project, marijuana-based in Virginia. And that's one thing we had to discuss for sure is, not only the amount of water it takes to water it, but what you do with the water once it's ran through nutrients and fertilizer, salts, and things like that. So, everything has a ripple effect, but...
it does, and I went up to New York City last month, and, I mean, as you know, everything is wide open up there,
it's
too.
the Wild West.
But we went to see Coldplay at MetLife Stadium, and what they did is they required all the stadiums to follow their eco-friendly guidelines.
Right.
So we were drinking beer out of aluminum cups, but then there was people riding bikes, exercise bike, to power the stage.
Oh, wow.
So think about that.
That's incredible.
Think about people riding bikes at the back of your project to power a stage.
Yeah, right.
But what they were saying is we're not going to take any power.
Right.
We're going to make you generate the power to see our show.
Wow.
So that was a kind of cool concept, and it was also like a
that's so un-American, man. You mean I just can't sit here and drink $10 beers and do nothing?
No, you got to pedal your way to pleasure,
though, man.
Pedal to pleasure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But but that thinking, Mike, I think is like it's going to like bleed into exactly of what you want to do. You want to build something eventually that has an educational message that people can walk into and say, now I understand the 25 different ways you can use this plant.
Right.
And that in itself is what we're still trying to achieve. And something like you're talking about conceptually could help with that as people walk in and truly start to learn about not only the history of the plant, but what are the future applications from this point on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at, man. We try to keep the educational aspect. Although I am starting to get questions like, what is HHI and what are Delta and THCO? And I'm like, well, I know enough about it where I don't know enough about it. So, and I try not to speak on things I don't know. But, I'm with you, man. We're fighting now this whole synthetic madness. And we're participating in it, but it wouldn't exist if we had full legal access to begin with.
It wouldn't. But you do hear And we've talked about this at length. You do hear
Right.
from your customers that they
enjoy
get
it.
that
100%.
relief, and a lot of them to be able to sleep
Without
at night.
paranoia and all kind of fun
Right,
things. So.
right. So that by eliminating what we see sometimes that folks experience with Delta 9 when they use traditional THC marijuana.
So if going forward, is there any group you're tying yourself to? Anybody you want to give a shout out to or a plug to in the future? Looking for Blake.
Yeah.
I'm-
Crown Town Cannabis.
we ain't going nowhere.
Well, I mean, there's so many,
Sure.
but as I mentioned before, I started out with a brand called HempX, and started doing events, HempX Asheville and other things. You will probably see me next month return to some initiatives using under the umbrella HempX.
Good.
But still being there to protect.
You can't leave us. The
No,
plant
I'm not
needs
leaving you.
The
Yeah,
plant
it'd
needs
be
you.
there to protect
We need you.
and educate. So just
Sure.
know that, like we talked about, even as things change, we don't change.
No.
We still stay together. We still figure out how to fight together. And more importantly, bring this plant to more people.
Awesome.
More people.
So if people want to get involved with HempX or they want to just talk to Blake Butler, the man, is there any contact information?
Oh,
you can drop
yeah.
for him?
You can email me, blakebutlerpr@gmail.com. There you go. Easy enough. It follows me around, and I usually answer everybody. Sometimes it takes me a couple days.
And again, folks, this guy, very modest, but trust me, this man puts in the work. He walks the walk, talks the talk. I got mad respect for you.
I got respect for you. Thank
very,
you.
very impressed with everything you've done. I've learned a lot from you. And with me knowing everything, it's rare that I learn anything. So that's good. But I just want to, take it back to what he said again. If you do take the time to go speak to a representative, senator, congressperson, whoever, do so as you would a job interview. Mm-hmm. Do so with respect.
Very professional.
I know it's hard to believe these people are humans too. Some of them. Some of them I'm not sure about. But, treat them how you would want to be treated, right? Mm-hmm. And talk to them. A lot of times, like Blake said, it's out of fear and ignorance that they side the way they side. It's rare that we can flip someone and teach them, but all you can do is speak the truth, and all they can do is take it in as they choose.
And be a good listener, Mike. I mean, I think that, we go in,
Right.
and they're just sitting there like, oh my gosh.
Right.
But saying like, Senator, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the hemp industry as well as, the possibilities of medical marijuana.
Sure.
And be a good listener. And then figure out, based on what he or she said, how you can adapt and morph those, future comments to work with them.
So, I dig that. So do you think you could help me get in touch with someone that maybe would come on the show to talk about their opposition? Or you think anybody's out in the open about their opposition, or most of them are?
I think we could probably dig up a couple of folks that could look at it just from an
I think it's
objective.
important. We always have people that's pro-cannabis on the show, and I like that. But I would love to hear some of the things. Well, I'd love for us to record some of the things that people think, and not necessarily for anything but a learning experience, a coaching experience of, okay, this sounds ridiculous, but this is a real fear to this person, or this is a real concern. Sometimes there's merit to it. This isn't I don't think it should be a free-for-all, all access to everyone kind of thing necessarily. There should be regulation and safety like everything else that we put in our body. But
I like the town hall idea. You mentioned before,
Right.
you take the message on the road, you'll see so many people come out of the woodwork.
Right.
You really
And
will.
if you are representing this industry, and myself included, clean yourself up a little bit. It's funny, we went to go meet Senator Jeff Jackson, and we walked up to him with a group, and I was there by myself, and of course I was wearing a cannabis shirt and everything, but a group had formed with me that were there to talk to him about cannabis as well, and before we could get up and introduce ourselves, he said, well, I know who you're here representing. So I was like, yeah, okay. But, we try to put our best foot forward. And, again, we all owe Blake a big round of applause. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mike.
And we're going to have you back on once you fire HempX back up and
yeah.
see how we can get involved. And, ultimately, anybody's got any questions for him, hit him up, hit me up. We'll get the answer for you. And, he hinted about possibly starting a retail organization, and that's something that we're going to talk seriously about getting going, because we do need representation in Raleigh and nationally, and not everybody's as good as Blake. But if anybody's got a story to tell, we're going to be doing this every Thursday recording. We can schedule other times. Anybody's got a story to tell, cannabis related or otherwise, just want to get on and talk about. It's all life learning, all good experiences, but Follow us at letsbeblunt.org. You can go on there and find the links to all our social media links and everything. You can get in touch with me, Mike, at cltcbd.com. I want to thank Crowntown Cannabis and the Plug Distribution for sponsorship and making this happen. And thanks so much, Blake. Blake and I are going to go get us some dinner and hang out and talk about what we can fight in the future.
That's right. Thank you so much, folks, for just being interested in the industry, and keep on supporting Mike Sims, Crowntown Cannabis, and the whole crew.
Thanks, everybody. We love you. And as always, peace, love, and cannabis.